A few months ago, I started hearing about a terrorist concept called the perfect day. And I'm going to get into exactly what that is here in just a second. But in general, it's a domino theory. I've been talking about it on the radio for over a year, and people have been thinking I'm crazy. The idea is that multiple, seemingly unrelated events may all converge together to pose a threat unlike anything we have ever faced before in this country. This week, we wanted to focus on one very important aspect of the theory that you're just not hearing about, although you're hearing pieces of it. The threat of an attack on our schools. Like almost all of the other really frightening threats that we talk about on this program, our message is one of preparation, not of panic. And it is critical that you understand why we are giving you this information that others either won't or cannot. With that being said, I want to introduce you to Brad Thor, whose new book, The First Commandment, revolves around the terrorist threat of an attack on our children. Brad is also the former member of the Department of Homeland Security's Analytic Red Cell program. Also, former FBI Special Agent Don Clark joins me tonight. He's the man who led the investigation after the first World Trade Center attack. And Colonel Joe Ruffini. He is a counterterrorism expert and author of When Terror Comes to Main Street. Colonel, I want to start with you because we have to lay out some of the facts here on, for instance, we found a computer disk and some computer plans of schools here in the United States over in the Middle East. Can you tell me about those, sir?
Yes, we did, Glenn. There have been several instances of computer disks recovered, the ones you're talking about in Iraq. Some Department of Education school emergency crisis management plans were found on the disk, school floor plans, school emergency response plans. But the point I'd like to make here is, you know, when we post this stuff on our websites, we can't get surprised when our enemies download it.
Yeah. Now, they're downloading this, but the FBI warned these schools and said there's 6 schools, 6 different states. They warned them, but then they came out to the public and said, well, there's nothing really to worry about. But, Brad, you told me earlier today that one of your sources, a guy who's at a school, the FBI made him sign a
non-disclosure agreement and then said, now we're going to tell you the real story. They didn't want to panic the families, didn't want to panic the school district, but they sat this person down and said, we need to let you know what the real threat is so you can begin preparing.
Okay. Now, Colonel, back to you, another piece of this. Al-Qaeda has a training tape out. It's 8 hours long. Only 1 hour has been seen by law enforcement. I can't play it on television. You've seen all 8 hours. Tell me what's on the tape.
Well, there was about 64 tapes found in Afghanistan in the caves, and what they did in this particular tape, it was prior to their attack on the Russian middle school in Beslan, and it shows them practicing to take down schools. The tape was made in an abandoned school near Mirbakhat, right outside of Kabul, that we recovered.
Is it true that they're saying the commands to the students in English?
Yes. Yes, they're going to speak to the students in their own language. And, you know, you said before, Glenn, this isn't about paranoia, but it's about vigilance. You know, we have an enemy that has said they are justified in killing 4 million Americans, 2 million of those children. We've got the siege at Beslan. We have Osama bin Laden, who has promised to bring to our country 100-fold what they did in Beslan. And it still confuses me what part of we are a nation at war and our kids are threatened don't we as a nation understand and accept?
Brad, Osama bin Laden went to a cleric, I believe it was in Saudi Arabia after 9/11.
Correct.
And he specifically asked, how many children in America can I kill? Did he not?
He did, and he got permission to kill up to 2 million. And the reason he went for that permission is he was roundly criticized after 9/11 for not going through the proper steps. We talked today about his call for Americans to embrace Islam again. That's part of the way they wage war. They have to have permission to do things, and they have to offer their enemy a way out before they come and hit us with the attack.
Okay, let me go to Don Clark. Don, before I get into some of the things that have been happening that show that they are testing us right now, the FBI, we're in a situation where people are going to say, what did we know and when did we know it? But we don't really know. We don't have names. We don't have dates. We don't have anything. We have a bunch of pieces that nobody wants to release because they're afraid that the American people will panic. What is the FBI supposed to do with information where they don't have anything specific?
Well, I think, Glenn, what they have to do is really analyze this information and determine what, in fact, can they put out there that's actual factual, but yet doesn't panic the public. And keep in mind, if there's a possibility that it's going to endanger some member of the public, whether or not they have something to back that up or not, if they've gotten that information, they've got to get it to someone out there.
You know what? They have. But then they always, here's one alert. This came out, FBI alert came out last March. It said that suspected members of extremist groups have signed up as school bus drivers in the U.S. But then the FBI spokesman said to the media, parents and children have nothing to fear. I mean, we have that going on. Tell me about the situation that we heard about, and then it was dismissed in Florida, where 2 Muslim men get up on onto a bus, take a bus hostage for how long?
Well, you know, Glenn, that's absolutely ridiculous. And when I saw that story, I says, wait a second. You know, first of all, these Muslims were supposed to be students over here. And we know the level of people that come over for students. They're pretty bright. And to get on a school bus and come up with this type of story is absolutely outlandish from somebody just to brush it off. Those are the things that I would hope that while they may say something else, that they're really following through with an investigation of these 2 people.
And on that point, Glenn, I have to tell you that I have an inside source who was on that investigation who told me, without a question, that there is a lot of feeling down there in Florida that that was a dry run. They wanted to see, we've talked about Al-Qaeda being like a shark, coming in and collecting their intelligence, and then they bump you before they bite you. That's John Geidick's line. He's going to be with us tomorrow night. But that's exactly what's going on. We're seeing these bus drivers and this, that, the other thing to see where are we weak and how can they get us.
Okay. Brad, you're absolutely right. And with those 2 bus drivers, a lot of pressure was put on the prosecutor's office by the community relations, what's called CARE, the American Islamic Relations folks down there. The political correctness that we're forced to put up with in this country is literally going to be the death of us. The major charges against both those 2 gentlemen that hopped that school bus were dropped by the prosecutor in Florida.
Okay. We're going to get into other things this week. For instance, I mean, what really made me want to do this story, America, is I heard all these things, and I've told you before, I see stories. Bush said it last week, or I mean last summer. The problem is people see these stories and they think they're all disconnected. They're not. And I've told you for years, I see things kind of like, what's his name in A Beautiful Mind, Russell Crowe, where all of these lines, they're tied together. And one thing that, Brad, you and I were talking about, and we'll get into later this week, you were saying that, you know, I said, why would they do these unspeakable things to our kids? And we'll get into Beslan tomorrow and explain what they're planning on doing. And you said they want us to.
They want to force our hand. They want to create something so horrible that we will lose control in our reaction. We will be lynching Muslim people in the streets and burning mosques. They want to reduce us to animals like them so that they can get the Islamic world behind them and finally get the holy war that they want kicked off and ignited.
There was a story that broke. We were talking a minute ago about the shark bumping into you to see if you're a threat. Dawn, you're in Houston. There were 17 school buses that are missing now in Houston. One theory is, and this is what everybody is hoping for, that these are just for, you know, drug smuggling or what. But tell me, give me the update on the school buses in Houston.
Well, it's a big concern, Glenn, and I went to the Houston Independent School District and talked to the chief of police there, and he was very happy to tell me that, look, we really do secure these things, but I have to tell you, Don, those are not our buses. Those buses came from private schools here in the area, and they were taken because they were not secured in proper ways or whatever, and they were theft, and we don't know what's happening to them. Having said that, I know that they're taking it very serious because I talked to some people at the FBI, and they're not just letting this move about as if nothing has happened because they are concerned about what's going to be the use of these buses because they know that there are a number of scenarios that could be used with school buses that even guards would let them pass by and do whatever they want them to do.
Here's what I have been amazed at. Brad, you were on with me on the radio show today, and I got more calls today on anonymous tips. Mm-hmm. Somebody wrote in right after the show, and you took that tip.
Right, and we heard about the dramatic increase in DHS warnings to school districts, in particular the operations managers for buses, saying if your buses don't pass inspection, be on the lookout for Middle Eastern men. There are foreign nationals who are trying to buy up school buses. And then you add that to the thousands of school bus radios that have been stolen in the Pacific Northwest, and you have to start saying, what do all these things have in common?
Gang, this is not something that is going to happen in one town. It's not just going to happen in New York City. This is a big, big deal, and we're going to explain it all this week. Brad, Don, Colonel Raffini, thank you very much. And I, as a personal note, this series has put me in the hardest ethical position I think I've been in 30 years of broadcasting. In the end, I came down that the information that we have is power. There are things that you need to know that you are not being told. We're not the New York Times. We're trying to save lives, not expose anything that our government doesn't want exposed. On tomorrow's show, we're going to get a little more specific on what an attack would look like, how it would unfold by looking at what really happened at the Beslan School massacre in 2004. Trust me on this, you have never heard the real truth.